Indiana basketball is 4-1 on the season, but the guard play has to improve.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen each and every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Well, Indiana basketball is 4-1 after the Empire Classic, going into this little bit of a Thanksgiving break. But the guard play needs to be better moving forward for Indiana. And the reason I say that is because you look at the schedule. We're going to do this a little bit more later on in the show today. But you look at who's coming up for this Indiana basketball team. You're about to get into Big Ten play. You're about to play two really good non-conference games back-to-back after that. And your guards they got to step up for Indiana, right? Let's break it down a little bit. You look at the guards that are seeing significant playing time right now. Of course, Xavier Johnson. Of course, Trey Galloway. Those are your two starters right now. And off the bench is CJ Gunn and Gabe Cupps. But it's been inconsistency with those guys so far this season. And we'll start with Xavier Johnson because he's the guy that makes this team go. He's the guy that makes Indiana's offense good or not good, right? When he is on and when he's playing his best basketball, that's on both ends of the floor, folks. When Xavier Johnson's playing good things happen. Indiana is moving the ball offensively. Indiana's getting good shots. Indiana's getting offensive rebounds. And Indiana's getting out and running a little bit in transition too, because Xavier Johnson with the ball in his hand, he starts that, right? He does that. And you look at his numbers through these first 5 games, and I know he's been dealing with injury, right? I know he went down with an injury late a couple of games ago. And I know that is kind of maybe hindered him a little bit, altered it a little bit, if you will. I get that. So bear with me here. But through 5 games, Xavier Johnson averaging 12 points, 2.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, right? He's got half a steal. He's got almost 2 turnovers a game. He's shooting 50% from the field and 79% from the free throw line and shooting 50% from 3, which there's not very many attempts, but he is making half of them. So you got to give credit where it's due. And so that brings up the question for Xavier Johnson: is 12 points on 50% shooting with 2.5 assists to 2 turnovers, is that good enough for your point guard? Is that good enough from your 6th-year college basketball point guard? The answer for me is no. The answer for me is no, and here's why. It's for what I just mentioned. He's been playing this game for a long time, and I know he's coming off the injury last year, and again, I know he's dealing with injury right now, and he's coming off of that. I get it. So don't come yelling at me. I know. But Xavier Johnson is the guy that makes everything work for Indiana. He makes it work offensively. He's a vocal leader on defense, one of the few on this Indiana team right now. And he's just a leader, man. He's a leader for this team that they need to be playing well. And it's just a natural thing. When somebody's playing well, they're going to be more vocal. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more energized in a basketball game. And that's what the Hoosiers and head coach Mike Woodson have to get from Xavier Johnson. I like the double-digit points. I've always said it, from a point guard, it doesn't necessarily mean you got to score. I know that's where the game of basketball is going and where it's at in some cases and some levels. But the point guard doesn't have to go out and score 20 points a night. But guess what? I need him to have some more assists. 2.5 assists averaging through 5 games is not good enough for me. It's not, especially when you're turning the ball over 2 times as well. Your ratio is terrible. 2.5 to 2 is not a good ratio for a point guard. It needs to be 2 to 1. That is the signal of a good point guard. I do like the shooting numbers. I love the shooting numbers. He's not shooting it very often, but I like the shooting numbers. 50% from the floor, 50% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line. I like that, right? Through these 5 games, and he's only played in a handful of minutes here. I like the numbers. I do. I like the shooting numbers. If he can keep that up, then you're in a good spot, right? You're in a really, really good spot here if he can keep the shooting numbers up when some of the other guys on the team maybe can't. So the points are fine. The shooting numbers are good. But I think he needs to be a facilitator just a little bit more. And I know the assist numbers aren't all on him. I think he makes good passes. But at the end of the day, the other guy's got to make the shot, right? The other guy has to step up and make the shot when you give him the basketball. And so I understand that. And he had 19 points against Army. That is more than enough from Xavier Johnson. But I need him to be better as a point guard. As your 6th-year basketball player point guard, I need that from him. What I also need from the guard spot is I need Trey Galloway to do a little something. Man, I need Trey Galloway to do something at the 2 spot. Be a shooting guard, bro. Right? Be a shooting guard. Through these 5 games, he's playing more minutes than anybody on Indiana's team. And he's just not shooting. He's averaging 9.5 points, but they seem to just come at random times and never in a streak. And there's been very few shots this year that I feel like Trey Galloway has hit that were like, man, that was a timely shot. We needed it from Trey Galloway, and he stepped up and did it. I haven't seen that yet, but I know it's in there. We all know it's in there. But Trey Galloway has to do that. He's averaging 9.5 points a game, 2 rebounds. He has 2.6 assists per game so far, so he's right there with Xavier Johnson. And he is shooting 50% from the floor. But here's the 2 shooting numbers I have a problem with. You ready? 65% from the free throw line and 21% from 3. What? That's not okay. You cannot be a shooting guard and not shoot the basketball effectively. That has to be better. And he's had open shots. And there have been times where he had open shots and we said, okay, we need it, Galloway. And he just clanked it or almost airballed it at times. Is it in there? Yeah, it's in there. But if Indiana wants to be competitive, he has to hit some shots. He has to be a threat as a shooter when you start playing better teams, because he can get his inside and he can get some of his in transition. We saw that against Louisville the other day. But he has to be a threat from the outside, because if he's not, teams won't respect that. Teams won't guard him. And when you see Indiana stall out in the half court because the defense packs themselves inside, that's why. It's because Galloway's not a threat to be a shooter right now. He has to be better. And if he does, and he does get better, Indiana's starting rotation could be really good at the guard spot. Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway can be the best 2-guard rotation in the Big Ten. But they have to play to their potential. They have to play to their potential. And if they don't, Indiana's going to be in trouble. We'll talk about coming up on the show. We'll talk about the backup guards, right? The guys off the bench, and what happens if the guards don't step up. What other positions kind of need some boost here after the Thanksgiving holiday? That's coming up in just a second. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the go-to daily fantasy sports app. It is my favorite. It is one of the first things that I get on each and every day. I maybe do it a little too much at the office, but we won't tell the bosses about that. I love Prize Picks, man. It is super easy, super fun, it's random, and it's just so different from all the other apps. You can play alongside some of your favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every week. And they have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. They offer weekly promotions all the time. I'm always getting notifications about their weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Well, looking at the guard spot and looking at some of the other positions for Mike Woodson and this Hoosiers basketball team, we talked about Xavier Johnson. We talked about Trey Galloway. But what about the other guards on this team, right? We know there's a lot of new names and there's a lot of new faces. And the two guys that are seeing significant playing time at the guard spot coming off the bench are Gabe Cupps and then CJ Gunn in the last couple of games. And if you've been listening to the show, my everydayers know this. CJ Gunn is my dude. I love CJ Gunn, man. I think he is a high energy guy. I think he's a really special talent, and I think he's going to be something really, really special here in Bloomington. I'm excited, and I hope he continues to get more minutes because every time he steps on the floor, you just know he's there, and he makes a play or two on offense, defense, hustle play, diving for the loose ball, out in transition, whatever it is. This guy just gets it, and he's fighting to get into the basketball game. And his numbers aren't going to blow you away, so I won't read them off to you, but it's not about the numbers with him. I want to see him continue to improve and continue to grow because he's not scared of the moment. He's not scared. He's proud to wear Indiana across his chest. And I think that's really cool, man. CJ Gunn could be really special here. And I think it's going to be a benefit for head coach Mike Woodson to have a guy like CJ Gunn. If he continues to play the way he is, if he can improve on his 3.5 points a game, which I think he will, if he gets significant minutes. And you know what? It may take another game where Xavier Johnson gets in foul trouble. I don't want that to happen, but there's a decent chance that it does. And when that does, who does Mike Woodson go to? Is it going to be CJ Gunn, or will he continue to go to Gabe Cupps, who, as a youngster, as a freshman, he's impressed early with his energy off the bench and his hustle, but not a whole lot of production. And I don't think there's a whole lot of expectations there, so I'm not going to harp on the guy too much. But I think CJ Gunn should be the go-to backup guard right now. I know Trey Galloway sometimes moves to that one spot, but I think with his size, he needs to stay at the 2. And I need him to step up and be a threat at the shooter, right? Be somebody the defense has to respect to shoot the basketball. In that case, when you talk about the guard spot, I think CJ Gunn is he's your X factor, if you will. I think if he can come in and play some good basketball, then you have a real good chance to be something special. Because you can't put it all on Xavier Johnson. I want him to be better, but you can't put it all on him. That's not fair. That's over expectations. So there has to be somebody to back him up. That's what great teams do, is have depth. And I think this Hoosiers team does have depth. They just got to find it. They got to use it the right way. And I think CJ Gunn can be that guy. Other positions, as we are off and running in this Indiana basketball season, other positions that kind of have to either impress so far or need to kind of get better as the year goes on. I think your forwards, right? I think we're all impressed with what Malik Renew has done so far. I know it's kind of been up and down, hit or miss, inconsistent, but you can see the talent is there and he's back, right? He's averaging 15 points a game. That is all you need from that young man. If he can get you 15 points, 4.5 rebounds, get you 3 assists to lead the Indiana Hoosiers, which I don't love that. I don't love it. I love it from Malik Renew's perspective, but I don't love it from the Indiana perspective. If you can get 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists out of him, shoot, you'll take that all day. And he's shooting 62% from the field, 73% from the free throw line. He doesn't shoot threes very often, so don't expect him to do that. But that is, I think he is the guy you've been most impressed with consistency-wise is Malik Renew. Your other forwards, of course, there's Mackenzie Mgbako, who we have talked about very, very much. And Mike Woodson had some interesting comments about Mackenzie Mgbako. He said, look, and he was talking about the media because he was asked about it post-game against Louisville. He said, you guys are expecting him to just be a superstar right away and just get the game because he has 5 stars next to his name. It's going to take a little bit of time. And that's what I've said on this show. And I agree. I just think we expected to see a little bit of that raw talent, right? That raw ability come out early, and it's just not been there. He has a nice stroke, a nice shooting stroke, but that's all I've seen. That's all I've seen from Mackenzie Mgbako. So he obviously needs to step up. And I think Anthony Walker played really, really good the other night and could be special for this Hoosiers team coming off the bench. And I said the other day, I think there's an argument for him to be starting right now because of the way he plays. So that position as a whole, there's a lot of good, there's some bad, and there's some right there in the middle. If you continue to bring that up, I think Indiana is going to be in a really good spot. And then, of course, you have Kel'el Ware at your center spot. What more could you ask from that young man? He is playing really, really well. He is second in the team in minutes. He is your leading scorer with almost 16 points a game. He's grabbing you 9 rebounds, which is what you want to see, right? I've said he's a walking double-double. He should be every single time. Every single time Kel'el Ware is on the floor, he should have double-digit points and double-digit rebounds by the end of the 40 minutes. He has 1.5 blocks. I'd love to see that continue to improve because he is a defensive menace in the paint. His field goal percentage, you would want it to be a little bit higher for a guy that's a center, but I'm fine with it. Free throw percentage, it's there. It's 72%. That's fine. We can get better there. And his three-point percentage, he hasn't taken many of them, but he's made a couple of them, shooting 43%. I don't love when he shoots threes, but if he can make one a game, that will make the defense respect him as a shooter. Same thing I was talking about with Trey Galloway, except I want to see him shoot a lot more. Kel'el Ware just has to make one. Make one a game. And if you do that, the defense has to go, oh, crap. When he's standing on the three-point line with the basketball, they have to come out and guard him. And that opens up the offense a ton. So overall, as we hit this little bit of a break, I know it hasn't been pretty. I know it hasn't been a whole lot of fun at times, but can you see the potential in this team? Because I can. I can. But overall, the guard play has to get better. I think you have to get more consistent play out of your middle guys, your forwards, right? Your 3 and 4s. And you got to continue to help out Kel'el Ware. And I think this team is going in the right direction, but they've got a lot of work to do still. And coming up on the show, we'll talk about what is coming up for Indiana after Turkey Day, kind of look at the schedule for the next 3 or 4 games, maybe 4 or 5 games, and kind of how Indiana is going to match up with some of these teams and how all these things we just talked about, how they can use these games to get better. And if they don't get better, what might happen in those games coming up in this 2023 schedule that's coming up in just a second. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the number one spot to get new hires. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It takes just a few steps. You go on, add your job, and there's a purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. So when people click on your profile or even just scroll past it, they see that you and your business are hiring, and then you can find out if they fit what you're looking for. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And want to remind you that Locked On has done something really, really cool. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It is super, super cool. It is growing like crazy. People are all over it. They love it. This show is in rotation there. Tons of Big Ten shows, basketball shows, football shows, all sorts of stuff. It is literally 24/7, 365 at Locked On Sports Today. Go check it out on YouTube and give them a subscribe. They would really, really appreciate it. Well, let's look ahead for Indiana on the basketball schedule, kind of what's coming up after the Thanksgiving holiday now that they have a little bit of a break coming out of the Empire Classic, which you go 1-1 there. I don't think you can complain a whole lot. Of course, there's things to work on, but overall, you come out of there with a loss to number 5 UConn and a win over Louisville. So here's what's coming up for the Hoosiers in their next, we'll say 5 games. All right, the next 5 games, you're home for Harvard on Sunday. Then you're home for Maryland after another 5-day break. So you get this nice break through the Thanksgiving week. You play on Sunday, and then you get another little break, right? You get that. Then you have Michigan. You have the Maryland game. You have the Michigan game. Then you have Auburn and Kansas. All right. Not too worried about the Harvard game, which I think is actually on a neutral site. So you're not at home, but it is what it is. I don't think anybody's too concerned about that Harvard game, but hey, we can't say anything, right? Florida Gulf Coast, Army, Wright State. We can't really say a whole lot just yet until Indiana proves that they can take care of business against a team that they're supposed to. But then it starts getting a little serious. Right? That's when you hit Big Ten play. Maryland on December 1st, on the road in Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Then you go down to Atlanta on a Saturday to take on Auburn. And then you take on the number 1 team in the country, the Kansas Jayhawks. You get a week in between the Auburn game and the Kansas game, and you might need it. I don't know. You might need it. It's a good Auburn team, and it's a really good Kansas team. So what happens if those things that we've talked about in this episode today, what happens if Indiana doesn't improve on those? What happens if the Hoosiers guard play can't improve? Well, I can tell you that on the road against Michigan, if you don't have good guard play and you continue to turn the ball over and stall out on offense, you're going to be in trouble. If you can't shoot the ball well from guys like Trey Galloway, Xavier Johnson, or even other guys like Mackenzie and Mgbako, you're going to struggle on the road. And if you can't be physical and get out and run with a team like Auburn or a team like Kansas, they're going to run you out of the gym. Now, can Indiana fix these things? Of course. Of course they can. If you start getting consistent play and more assists from Xavier Johnson, I think you have a good shot against Maryland and on the road against Michigan. If you can get some better shooting, because look, Maryland and Michigan are not great teams. They're not. They're struggling out of the gate. But it's Big Ten play. Those are Big Ten teams, and they are better outside of UConn. They're going to be better than anything you've seen up to that point. You could argue Louisville, I guess, but probably not. So then you're going to be seeing the best teams that you can see this year, especially with how the Big Ten has started out, which is not so hot. But you at least get Maryland to open up, a team that's not all that great. You do have to go on the road to Michigan. Don't love it. It's on a Tuesday night, a late Tuesday night there in Michigan. And then you're going to play Auburn down in Atlanta, a game that, look, I know Hoosier fans travel, but that's going to be a more road environment than it is a home environment. And then you have the number 1 Kansas Jayhawks. It's going to be a tough task. And I think it's important to realize that Indiana can grow up in these games and fix some of these things and show some more fight like they did against Louisville when they had to, after they blew their lead, when they came back to beat the Cardinals, came back to beat them in the second half. So if you can get better production or maybe even shift out and change up the starting lineup, I'm cool with it, man. I'm cool with it. I've said it about Mackenzie and Mgbako. Until he shows you what you need, I think you got to bench him. I don't know what you do with Trey Galloway. I don't want to bench him. I think his size gives him a big advantage, and I think that'll keep you in some ball games, and that'll help you balance out what you'll see with Michigan and with Auburn and maybe even with Kansas too. But guys, when Indiana plays Kansas, what are you going to do about Hunter Dickinson? What are you going to do about him? Because he's going to have a day, and Kel'el Ware is going to have his hands full, and which means Hunter Dickinson is going to stop Kel'el Ware. Where do you go for offense? Who's it going to be? And this is something we talked about earlier in the week where the Hoosiers got to get consistent play from more than just one person a night. And it can't be a different person every night. You got to find consistent offense from multiple people. And I think the defense has gotten a lot better. And believe me, you're going to need it. You're going to need it when you find teams that like to shoot the ball and like to run. And if you start turning the ball over, which I don't think the Hoosiers have been horrible about, if you start doing that, you're going to be in trouble. The schedule gets tough from here, folks. It gets tough. Not the Harvard game, but and maybe not even the Maryland game. But Michigan, Auburn, Kansas, back to back to back. Yeah, we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot. And then you get some easier games in there before you get into the real Big Ten play on January 3rd against Nebraska. It's going to be all right. There's some talent on this team, but teams like Kansas, they might expose you a little bit. But as I've been saying, use it as a learning experience. Use it as a chance to change out some of these rotations. If you find yourself down big against the Kansas, all right, let's change things up a little bit. Let's figure out what we're good at, figure out who plays well together, and let's see if we can get better as a team. And if you can get through that stretch of, let's just say, Maryland, Michigan, Auburn, Kansas, how about 2-2? Is that unreasonable to say? Is 2-2 an unreasonable ask? Maybe. I think the realistic thing would be 1-3, right? Beat Maryland, tough loss on the road at Michigan, and probably lose it late against Auburn or Kansas. But what happens if you go 2-2, right? You beat Harvard, hopefully. You're 5-1. Beat Maryland, you're 6-1. And then 6-2, 6-3, 6-4 with 3 easier games coming up. I don't think that's hateful. And your losses would be number 5, UConn, an Auburn team that should be top 25, the number 1 team in the country, Kansas, and on the road at Michigan. I don't think that's too bad. And as long as Indiana's getting better and improving in those games, I think I'm fine with it. I appreciate you making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. That's going to do it for today's episode. No episode tomorrow for Thanksgiving. I'm taking it off. I'm going to enjoy it with family and friends. I hope you do as well. So happy Thanksgiving to you and to your family and to the entire Hoosier family. I am thankful for you. I'm thankful for everybody at Locked On. I'm thankful for this opportunity and just very, very thankful for the position that I'm in. So enjoy the holiday. I'll have an episode brand new up for you on Friday. We'll be previewing that Harvard game and kind of looking ahead and seeing what this Indiana team can do in that matchup and moving forward. So until then, be sure you like the video, subscribe on YouTube. It helps me out tremendously. And if you're on any podcasting platform, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So be sure you go and find it there as well. Again, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. We'll be back on Friday and posting every day like we do Monday through Friday. Okay. So again, happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back on Friday. And until then, stay safe, Hoosier fans, and I'll talk to you later.